Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Murad Awadeh, Executive Director at New York Immigration Coalition, an organization advocating for the rights of all immigrants in New York State. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today, we're going to learn about an organization that is uniting immigrants, members, and allies so all New Yorkers can thrive. Hello, Murad. Welcome to Grade.com Talks With. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Wonderful. Could you please describe New York Immigration Coalition for someone who is not familiar with your work?
Sure. The NYC is a policy and advocacy organization with more than 200 organizations, part of our coalition across the entire state of New York, from Buffalo down to Brooklyn, all the way to the east end of Long Island. We were founded in 1987. The NYC is the largest immigrant advocacy organization in the nation, and the oldest. For more than 3 decades, we've been working to unite immigrants, members, and allies so all New Yorkers can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Running for 30 years and uniting more than 200 organizations that work with immigrants, that are aware of the issues that immigrants face and are fighting for the rights of immigrants, and you bringing them together so not only immigrants but New York residents in general can thrive together. That's very beautiful to see that. We all know that New York and New York City is the most diverse city, and New York is the diverse state with the largest number of immigrants across the United States. Could you please tell us the history, how New York became one of the most interesting and safe havens for immigrants in the United States?
You know, with Ellis Island here in New York's harbor, many immigrants initially traveled through, on ships through Ellis Island to get to the United States, and a lot of immigrant communities ended up staying in New York. And New York has been home to immigrants since the state has been a state, and we have really had the ability and the privilege of having immigrant communities really build New York State to what it is today. So the history of New York is really amazing and incredible, with Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, and then really the big boom of immigration that happened in the 1900s, with folks from across the world coming here, and really allowing communities to thrive in a city. If you can make it, there's a saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And a lot of folks have made it in New York and have made New York their home. And as an organization, the NYC has really tried to make sure that regardless of someone's immigration status or how new they've been in the state, we want all New Yorkers to be able to thrive in our state.
Mm-hmm. Wow, the New York has a beautiful history and beautiful story of bringing and welcoming immigrants, starting from Irish immigrants, and then in 1900s, welcoming all immigrants across the world, and actually providing an opportunity for people from different countries come together and build the future for them to make sure that they are running for better opportunities and creating a better society in general, with other immigrants and other locals being present in New York. As you are working directly with immigrants and immigrant organizations across New York State, could you please tell us what are some of the challenges immigrants currently face in the United States?
Yeah, I think that over the past 4 years with our previous president, we had the most anti-immigrant administration we've ever seen in the history of our country. And pretty much, the former administration vilified immigrant communities in not just New York, but across the nation. So our work over the past 4 years has been really incredible in being able to push back against a lot of the issues that we were seeing being thrown at us from the federal government. But the issues that still remain, even with a different president, have been longstanding. We've been fighting for language access to ensure that people have services and support in languages that they speak and can read and write. We've been working on ensuring that people have access to legal representation through, qualified immigration attorneys, and making sure that organizations who provide legal services are fully funded. Healthcare access and ensuring that immigrants have access to healthcare has also been a huge issue and still continues to be an issue. Even during the global pandemic, the state has not ensured that everyone, regardless of immigration status, can actually purchase health insurance, which is a huge issue for, in normal life, let alone during COVID. So we have our work cut out for us. We have an enormous amount of issues, but we've also won a lot over the past couple of years. This past year, in just about 2 months ago, we won the first in the nation, Fund for Excluded Workers. These are workers who receive no aid or no support from the federal government, the state government, or local government. And we were able to secure from our state $2.1 billion for nearly 500,000 New Yorkers excluded from any relief that was given before, or any social safety net programs like food stamps, healthcare, unemployment benefits. So this is going to be a groundbreaking program that we were able to secure this past year, not past year, but these past 2 months. And now we're working on what that's going to look like and how we get that money out to people who need it the most. We've also really restored the right for immigrants without status to get driver's licenses. That was a huge win for our communities who, when they interface with local law enforcement, sometimes local law enforcement then calls immigration authorities because someone, was driving without a driver's license and they happen to be undocumented. We have a lot of work ahead of us. So there's a lot of good stuff that we've been able to do, and we'll continue to do. But we're really thinking about how do we make the life of immigrants here in New York, the life of people with status, without status, the life of people of color, easier here in New York, but also across the nation, and also ensuring that people have access to justice, that our state is providing fairness and the pathway for everyone, and literally everyone and anyone, immigrant, refugee, or New York born, to be able to thrive in our state and continue to keep New York their home.
Mm-hmm. Well, despite having the past 4 years not an administration that wasn't favorable in terms of the immigration, yet the work of the organizations such as yours didn't stop. Instead, your advocacy became more ground upon, more sound and voiceful, and you were able during this pandemic, you mentioned, to secure a relief program in the amount of more than $2 billion to help 500,000 immigrants. That's a great accomplishment, and I can see the benefit of it helping so many people who struggled upon these hard times as well. You mentioned about the driver license program. It's very important that now people can, immigrants without the status can feel safe driving and not being vilified by police or other departments. So that's very important to understand that. You mentioned that the previous administration has vilified the image of immigrants, and now your organization is working on distracting that image. Could you please tell us some of the benefits of immigrations and arguments that you use against people who vilify immigration?
Well, the former president actually, before he became president, began vilifying immigrants by calling certain communities rapists, by urging violence against certain communities. And it was just when he was running his campaign, and it was incredibly horrid and unjust when he won. And he continued his attacks. He came through on his promises. He said he was going to ban Muslims, and he definitely tried. And we fought back. We rallied tens of thousands of people from the day it was signed at JFK Airport all the way to ensuring that families who needed a waiver were able to receive one to be able to reunite with their families here. What he did at the southern border, engaging children and pretty much gutting our asylum program, him trying to rescind the DACA program, and then the court upholding it. So there are a lot of things that he did that were policy oriented. I think the anti-immigrant sentiment that he really pushed out there was hints of it before, but he emboldened people who were shy about their racism, their xenophobia, and their bigotry to be able to say it out loud. So immigrants have always made America great. Immigrants have helped build this nation, and economic contributions are great for the U.S. Hundreds of billions of dollars are infused in our U.S. economy because of the immigrant community globally across the United States, from California all the way to New York and everyone in between and from below and above us. So, immigrants provide innovation. The vaccines, two of the vaccines were actually created in partnership with folks who are immigrants in the United States. So every aspect of our life has and continues to be, really important to ensure that we're allowing communities to really build a more just and humane society. And we can only do that if we're all together. And when we exclude people, that's when we start seeing the downfall of humanity, to be honest with you. And during his presidency, we did see that, where people were pitted against each other in a really negative way. So I think to answer your question directly, there's a lot of work that needs to happen. And I think it starts with education, making sure that people understand the contributions that immigrant communities make in the United States. But even bigger than that is being able to see each other. And I think that that's a big piece that we've lost as a nation is not looking at the enormous qualities that make us similar and the things that unite us. But really, what he did was he looked at the differences and dug into them to make that why people, why the differences were more important than the similarities. And that's not the case. Our uniqueness as a nation comes from our diversity.
Absolutely. Indeed, the benefits of immigration in the United States is countless. So the financial, the economic contribution, the innovation, the activism and the diversity that immigrants can bring both helps the country in social, economic, and political, in all different aspects of life. So appreciating that and communicating that message is very, very important. And you mentioned increasing awareness so other people realize, so other people can become aware of the extent of contribution that immigrants are making in the United States. As an organization, you run multiple programs, and one of your programs is called Blueprint for the Nation program. Could you please describe that program in detail?
Sure. Our recent Blueprint for the Nation, which is our Blueprint 2.0, we partnered with the California Immigration Policy Center and worked with them on creating what is the vision for immigrant nation. And, California and New York have been at the forefront of really pushing immigrant integration and pushing for inclusion of immigrants in our states. And the blueprint actually outlines what New York and California can still do, but also what we have done, and then providing a pathway for other states to do the same. So making sure that we're building democracy and power, making sure that our communities are healthy, making sure that we're pushing and ensuring that our children get education that is of quality and substance. So the blueprint is actually, a very forward-facing future vision of what this nation can look like. And we encourage folks to read it. It is a policy document, but it definitely outlines the great contributions that we've been able to make as California and New York, with having, specifically in New York, with having the second largest immigrant population in the nation, but the first most diverse immigrant population when you look at the variances and where people are coming from here and who lives here and what statuses they have.
Mhm. Wow, two states that have been a role model when it comes to immigration now advocating for a policy change and actually bringing the experience, the expertise that California and New York were able to build in the last 200 years, and now sharing it as a role model for other states that can learn and copy it and implement in their local communities and local states is very, very important. So knowledge sharing and policy sharing, and it's very important to indicate that what has been done and the positives that have been done in New York and in California, and what can be done in other states across United States. And you mentioned there are the blueprint is a policy analysis. Could you please tell us some examples of policy changes or policy analysis that you propose to make the life of immigrants much better in the upcoming years?
Sure. So I mentioned two earlier, which was the Greenlight New York campaign that we ran, which restored the right for people, regardless of their immigration status, to get a driver's license. The other was the Fund for Excluded Workers. Just recently we passed the New York Heroes Act, which is, the first in the nation workplace guidance on how to ensure that communities were safe, because employers were actually having safe workplaces for their employees. So we're continuing to push. Those are all policy ideas at first, and they turn into campaigns. Right now in New York City, we're working on a campaign called Our City, Our Vote, which would allow for and enfranchise nearly 1 million New York City residents to be able to vote in municipal elections. So city elections, which are currently happening on June 22nd, is the primary. If anyone who's listening lives in New York City, make sure you go out and vote in the June primary. Our City, Our Vote is legislation that will allow green card holders and people with work authorization to vote in municipal elections. This isn't a radical piece of legislation. Dozens of other municipalities across the nation across the world already do this, but we would be catching up with the trend. But New York City would be the largest city to actually allow for municipal voting for people who are green card holders or have work authorization, which would be a huge and historic win for not just the city, but for the people who live here, who call New York City home, who currently do not have a voice in how their tax dollars are being spent, nor how their policy is being shifted and moved. Another big policy campaign that we're moving is making sure that the Biden administration at the federal level provides immigrants with who are with a temporary status or without status a pathway for legalization and citizenship. And we're working on passing legislation or looking at different avenues like budget reconciliation to ensure that dreamers, temporary protected status holders, and our essential workers who we relied on throughout this entire pandemic, and we went out every night and clapped for them at 7 p.m., but we deemed them essential during the pandemic, and they've always been essential. So now it's time for the federal government to really step up and provide them with a pathway for legalization. So there's a lot of different work we're working on. And I don't want to take up too much time on this, but those I would say are some of the two biggest things we're working on right now to help move forward New York City, and our country in the right direction.
Mm. Wow, seeing that you are indeed advocating for the rights of all immigrants in New York State, whether it includes issues related to politics or the social or economic issues. So seeing the range of the work and policy and campaigns that you're doing that impacts the lives of immigrants in all aspects of life is very impactful to see that. If someone would like to support New York Immigration Coalition, how can they do that?
Sure. Folks can go to our website, www.nyic.org, and donate to support our work and make sure that we have the resources to continue to fight for our communities. Folks could also sign up to volunteer, to take action with us, and they can visit our website, which is www.nyic.org, to do just that. And it'll provide you with everything you need to know about the work that we do, how to donate to our organization, and how you can take action.
Wonderful. The link to the New York Immigration Coalition website will be provided in the description. So you viewing and listening can go to the website and familiarize yourself with the great work Murad and the team at New York Immigration Coalition are doing and make a contribution to support them. Thank you so much, Murad. It was wonderful to get to know you and the great work your organization is doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button because this will show the YouTube and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, that we need to advocate for the rights of all immigrants. Thank you and see you in the next episode.